James Cameron is revisiting Pandora once more, beckoning us back into its captivating embrace. Following the resounding triumph of Avatar: The Way of Water, expectations are stratospheric. We are promised a deep dive into hitherto unexplored regions of Pandora, a glimpse into Navi's culture unseen thus far, and, judging by the title, the introduction of conflict and potentially darkening undertones into the narrative. Avatar: Fire and Ash is poised not merely to continue, but to elevate the epic saga. Yet, as with any blockbuster, it invariably sparked debate. Where has Cameron succeeded this time around, and where perhaps the magic began to wane? Let me preface this by stating my position. I'm not a film critic, nor am I well versed in such matters. However, as a viewer, I trust I'm entitled to watch a film and express my opinion on it. Wouldn't you agree? You're equally welcome to share your thoughts in the comments below. More than just a box office success, the first Avatar represents a veritable cultural phenomenon, adhering as the highest grosser film ever made. Even a simple trip to the cinema felt extraordinary during my childhood, but seeing Avatar completely blew my young mind back then. Cameron offered the audience something different. He unveiled Pandora, a living organism, a synthesis of the spiritual and material realms. It struck me that such universes are not only plausible, but may well represent the future that awaits us. For the first time, the 3D world transcended mere scenery and woven into a vibrant, breathing ecosystem. Cameron has consistently demonstrated visionary aptitude, and Avatar represented a genuine technological watershed moment. The film didn't merely employ 3D, it necessitated it. Viewers flocked to the cinemas less for the narrative itself, and more to immerse themselves in the world of Pandora. My own viewing experience evoked the feeling of a kitten encountering snow for the very first time. Cameron engineered an unprecedented leap forward in animation and visual effects. It trances mere cinema. It's demonstrably groundbreaking artistry. Artificial intelligence is ubiquitous in the day and age. Back then, such animation and motion capture technology weren't merely novelties. They were deployed on a scale virtually unprecedented globally. Consider that a mere 15 years have elapsed since then. Nowadays, animated films are being crafted entirely through artificial intelligence. Previously, such a feat would have been utterly inconceivable. Indeed, it was a remarkable era. Films weren't merely watched, they were experienced viscerally. People wouldn't emerge from cinemas profoundly affected, compelled to recommend them to everyone they knew. Personally, the sequel evoked a less favorable response. I found the plot to be excessively convoluted, lacking internal coherence and fundamentally predisposing us towards a third installment. Given that the initial installment posed a plethora of intricate and profound questions, addressing both the characters' internal struggles and broader global trends, it's understandable why anticipation is higher. After all, Avatar, as many will recall, is fundamentally a cyberpunk world brimming with exoskeletons, the narrative of which unfolds on another planet, depicting its usurpation for resource extraction, with subsequent colonization as the ultimate objective. Cameron therefore furnished not only a visually stunning spectacle, but also embedded in his work historically informed, philosophical, psychological, and socially pertinent reflections, which we as viewers were expected to glean. Having watched numerous interviews in preparation for this video, I noted that Cameron himself emphasized how the second film delves deeper into the interpersonal family conflicts and issues that arise in many couples. However, the director seemingly failed to realize that he identified the very existence of children as the primary source of contention. As everyone surely recalls, in the second installment, the children were unequivocally the primary instigators of the unfolding events. Had it not been for one group of children, the plot would never have materialized. Conversely, had it not been for another, some characters would have survived. Indeed, the protagonist's harrowing predicaments were largely attributable to the children's actions. Unlike the first film, which presented a reasonably logical exploration of conflicting factions and interests, the second film rather gratuitously introduced children who meddled incessantly and demonstrated a conspicuous inability to comprehend the world. No! Let's delve in the plot analysis. But before we commence, I extend my profound gratitude to my boosters. You quite literally sustain the existence of this channel. Furthermore, my appreciation extends to everyone who likes this video. It's genuinely beneficial for my mental well-being. The film opens with two brothers soaring through the skies on ekrans, engaging in playful banter and competitive aerial pursuits. This transpires to be a dream sequence experienced by Jake's younger son, Loak, who grapples with persistent self-reproach. He reflects on his past disobedience and the disruptive nature of his action during previous separations. Consequently, his insubordination indirectly resulted in his brother catching a fatal bullet, a burden Loak continues to bear. A discerning viewer might wag a finger, pointing out that the channel's author rather frequently alludes to plot points from previous installments, urging a progression to the narrative of the third film. However, the overwhelmed author dares to decelerate this burgeoning animosity. The director inexplicably dedicated a substantial portion, nor less thought, of the runtime to reiterating information already established in previous installments. Specifically, the imminent demise of Colonel Corlish's son Miles is re-emphasized. He will succumb without an oxygen mask, being a human child on Pandora. Similarly, the fatal consequences to Grace Augustine's daughter Kiri should she re-establish contact with Ava due to their unique connection are redundantly clarified. And, unsurprisingly, it is hammered home that the protagonist, Jake Sully, formerly a Marine, has settled on Pandora, integrating into the local culture and establishing a family. We immediately preview the protagonist's motivations. The Jake, who in the first installment vowed to take responsibility for his family and clan, is now a ghost of his former self. In the second part of the Avatar trilogy, the director has effectively buried that character, and the third definitely sealed his fate. Jake's actions ostensibly make sense. He deserted his tribe to safeguard his family. Yet by his own admission in the first installment, his clan had also become his family. Why not relocate everyone together to the Water Tribe? The protagonist posits that this would minimize casualties, as the military sought after him. However, this rationale rings hollow. It's patently a flaw in the narrative. Firstly, the Air Tribe's continued guerrilla offensives since Jake's departure will incur the full brunt of the military's retaliation. Secondly, interrogators will inevitably target the tribal where he last held leadership, seeking information about Jake's whereabouts and the location of his family. Here too, Jake is behaving like a self-centered individualist, completely disregarding his children and indeed his wife, who is, to put it mildly, struggling in the wake of their child's passing. He is gearing up for his own personal war, amassing weaponry that was previously submerged in the last installment. The chieftain of the Water Tribe is disgruntled with Jake's conduct, primarily because Saga herself apparently opposes human weaponry, concluding only the bow and spiritual connection. This is a peculiar development, considering the Na'vi previously availed themselves of firearms in warfare. Now they are deliberately forgoing such advantages. Secondly, Jake has spurned his beloved, who is consumed by grief. Undoubtedly, some observers might interject here, arguing that in a state of war, grief and compassion are secondary. Priority should be given to strategizing our defenses and fortifying our positions. Dedicating even a fleeting moment to one's family, particularly when a mother is steeped in inconceivable mourning over her son's death, would be deemed inappropriate. While there is a semblance of validity to that stance, we aren't actually under martial law. The Water Tribe continues to thrive, indulging in pleasurable activities, hunting, trading, and carrying out their rituals and festivities with abandon. Jake resolved to do right by his beloved Neytiri, who had defended and chosen him. Consequently, he would remain by her side as she grieved, consumed by inconceivable sorrow over the loss of their child. However, his behavior toward her could be described as, to put it mildly, insensitive. While it's true that individuals process grief in disparate ways, one would expect a modicum of compassion from the child's father, and instead of simply basking and being chaperoned or even quietly sitting together, our new Jake resorts to doling our meager offerings of himself. As if to say, look, Neytiri, I'm Marine,
What exactly did you expect from me? It's already excruciatingly painful for her. She is already suffering immensely. And to heap further torment upon her by asserting that she is culpable, that she chose a marine, as opposed to accepting him as he is, seems incredibly self-serving, doesn't it? Remarkably, in the initial installment, Jen exhibited a willingness to evolve, not solely for Neytiri's sake, but also in pursuit of an enhanced version of himself. He showed an openness to expanding his understanding of the world, grasping that harmony and equilibrium can exist between nature, one's inner self, and the instruments of warfare.
Jake immediately resorts to a fossil, "I'm marine! What did you expect? What did you want from me?"
Undoubtedly, Jake will later apologize to his wife, professing his love. However, it will ring hollow like yet another obligation fulfilled, especially considering his silence when Neytiri expressed that nothing remained familiar from her previous home, including her bow. Jake sadly neglected to mention that the bow had been found broken. Instead, he simply instructed his son to dispose of it, and ensured his mother remained oblivious.
Recall my mentioned trait. Well, in this narrative, Cameron broadens the world's scope, enabling intertribal commerce.
Just as the caravan was arriving, Spider-Man's oxygen supply was dwindling, prompting the family patriarch to resolve to dispatch the child to the human station. After all, should his mask fail far from home, he would simply perish. Upon divulging this plan to the children, they immediately rebelled against the prospect of sending Miles to live amongst humans. How could they possibly prioritize the safety of some child? He absolutely had to remain with them. Only after Jake Sully proposed an excursion for everyone to transport Spider-Man together did the children acquiesce. Why? What's the rationale behind dragging the children along? It's patently obvious that something untoward and bound to befall someone. But Jake seems impervious to learning from past missteps, confident in his superior judgment. Thus, the entire written embarks on his foolhardy venture. Meanwhile, Corny Quaritch remains implacable, relentlessly pursuing Jake in his quest for retribution. The military doesn't inspire awe in me, as it didn't in the initial installments. Now it simply elicits laughter. I noted down an utterly ludicrous quote from the film. Get this. "Sir, I promised the technician a crate of beer if he dug something up for us." Apparently, pivotal strategic operation on this exploration planet are now being determined by the promise of beer. Let us observe a moment of silence for the ruthlessly efficient military force from the initial installment, who intended to seize this planet for resource extraction and mineral exploitation, who sought to subjugate its flora and fauna, inspiring dread with their fervent ideology and unwearying dedication. They served not merely as an allusion to the colonization of the 15th and 16th centuries, but also as a stark depiction of humanity's potential for depravity, if left unchecked. In the second film, my reservation concerned not the military separation capacity, but rather the rationale underpinning the actions. In essence, the command was prepared to allocate an entire dedicated squad of exorbitantly expensive avatars and bankroll a multi-billion-dollar operation, all to eliminate one Jake Sully. His guerrilla incursions were hindering their planetary exploitation and the extraction of specific resources, which were crucial for expanding their base. Yet, inexplicably, these wearisome military forces, having fallen short of their objective, are now poised to curtail the operation. Subsequently, they are meticulously scrutinizing even the most trivial details, ostensibly for beer. Weaponry and equipment have become markedly scarce, with some items having vanished altogether. Is this purportedly a military conditioned embarking on a mission of paramount importance to colonize a distant planet? And is this purportedly a crack squad tasked with identifying a saboteur?
What the fuck is going on?
Just as the caravan was arriving, Spider-Man's oxygen supply was dwindling, prompting the family patriarch to resolve to dispatch the child to the human station. After all, should his mask fail far from home, he would simply perish. Upon divulging this plan to the children, they immediately rebelled against the prospect of sending Miles to live amongst humans. How could they possibly prioritize the safety of some child? He absolutely had to remain with them. Only after Jake Sully proposed an excursion for everyone to transport Spider-Man together did the children acquiesce. Why? What's the rationale behind dragging the children along? It's patently obvious that something untoward and bound to befall someone. But Jake seems embarrassed, learning from past missteps, confident in his superior judgment. Thus, the entire retinue embarks on his foolhardy venture. Meanwhile, Corny Quaritch remains implacable, relentlessly pursuing Jake in his quest for retribution. The military doesn't inspire awe in me, as it didn't in the initial installments. Now it simply elicits laughter. I noted down an utterly ludicrous quote from the film. Get this. Sir, I promised the technician a crate of beer if he dug something up for us. Apparently, pivotal strategic operation on this exploration planet are now being determined by the promise of beer. Let us observe a moment of silence for the ruthlessly efficient military force from the initial installment, who intended to seize this planet for resource extraction and mineral exploitation, who sought to subjugate its flora and fauna, inspiring dread with their fervent ideology and unwearying dedication. They served not merely as an allusion to the colonization of the 15th and 16th centuries, but also as a stark depiction of humanity's potential for depravity, if left unchecked. In the second film, my reservation concerned not the military separation capacity, but rather the rationale underpinning their actions. In essence, the command was prepared to allocate an entire dedicated squad of exorbitantly expensive avatars and bankroll a multi-billion-dollar operation, all to eliminate one Jake Sully. His guerrilla incursions were hindering their planetary exploitation and the extraction of specific resources, which were crucial for expanding their base. Yet, inexplicably, these wearisome military forces, having fallen short of their objective, are now poised to curtail the operation. Subsequently, they are meticulously scrutinizing even the most trivial details, ostensibly for beer. Weaponry and equipment have become markedly scarce, with some items having vanished altogether. Is this purportedly a military conditioned embarking on a mission of paramount importance to colonize a distant planet? And is this purportedly a crack squad tasked with identifying a saboteur?
Meanwhile, as anticipated, our heroes and merchants find themselves under attack. It is here that the view is afforded their first glimpse of the fire and ash people.
There is a veritable abundance of fire, everything is vivid and lush. I'll admit I was subconsciously anticipating seeing these people astride fire-breathing dragons, which would have expanded the human perception of Pandora even further, in camera's inimitable style, but alas, that wasn't the case. Jake commands his son to safeguard his sisters, given that he is the only one remaining who possesses firearm proficiency. However, I frankly lost count of how many times Jake's son flagrantly disregards not only his father's direct order, but also the entreaty to protect his sisters. Instead of remaining by the side of the defenseless girls, the brother delegates that responsibility to Spider-Man, who is imminently running out of oxygen. Indeed, one might construe it as a display of selfless courage, applauding the adolescent's readiness to engage. However, it seems the loss of his own brother failed to instill in him the understanding that reckless, impulsive action is inadvisable. Predictably, this initial foray results in a serious setback, and he survives only by sheer luck. I must confess the battle genuinely impressed me. The main antagonist is simply remarkable, charismatic, vibrant, and unlike any previous villains. She truly captivated me. It's her seamless coordination in the assault that bears fruit. The merchant convoy has been ravaged and seized.
Much like myself upon witnessing it in the cinema, you, dear viewers, are in for a truly astonishing experience.
Yet, amidst the vast expanse of forest ravaged by the crash, where the entire convoy was scattered across hunters and hectares, Jake's soul is located by his nemesis within moments. In an unforeseen twist, upon observing his shattered breath and apparatus, Corny Quaritch, reminiscent of a paternal Spider-Man, is overcome by a profound sense of protectiveness indeed, tripled towards a child whose existence was previously unknown to him, glimpsed only fleetingly before. Consequently, he implores Jake Sully to assist in locating the boy.
What truly captivates in this situation is Neytiri, who, blinded by grief, launched herself into ferocious assault
absorbing the brunt
even
of the
like-
main antagonist offensive.
Sigourney.
Despite being struck by an arrow
Jim?
and plummeting from a considerable height, she mustered
Sam?
the strength to guide her Ikran all the way to the Namans, seeking assistance and reinforcements in the fight against this emergent adversary. Miraculously, all the children survive the catastrophe, but Spider-Man is running out of oxygen. Consequently, they are endeavoring to return to the crash site, where oxygen masks might theoretically be scarce. However, the children are unable to reach their location in time, as Miles begins to asphyxiate. And just like that, it transpires that Kiri possesses the spiritual capabilities of Ava. The girl conducts a ritual on Miles, and it's thanks to this very act that the child begins to breathe unaided and regrows years prepared for interfacing with Ava.
You know, in that juncture, I found myself in a state of utter bewilderment.
After all, our tower has now transcended the ground in science fiction that defined it in the initial installment. You know, the one featuring cryo-sleep for interstellar travel and space stations reminiscent of contemporary designs. Avatar has metamorphosed into an unequivocally fantastical narrative. While perhaps not a crippling flaw, it arguably detracts from the overall immersion within the universe. Wouldn't you concur? I'm still reeling from the revelation of Wild Blubber's purported ability to halt human aging. And now, we're presented with a Spider-Man Avatar hybrid. As expected, Cameron predictably replicates his established formula film after film. To paraphrase the revered classics, consistency is either a hallmark of mastery or a reluctance to innovate. Once again, the offspring branching out from their elders stumble into dire straits, finding themselves captured by the airstrike. Though the parents promptly arrive on the scene, their surprise result proves ineffectual, resulting in the paternal figures also getting the short end of the sick from the Farley Brook banks. The ash-striped chieftain has an interest in firearms, and of course the colonel is no slouch. Spotting an attractive woman, he immediately moved in, explaining the ins and outs of loading, aiming and firing. The her's response is fairly reasonable, essentially a thank you, but I have no further use for you. One would anticipate the heroes being eliminated at this point. However, inexplicably, they are merely tied up, left on the ground while their captors embark on their nefarious activities. Impaired by the substances they've ingested, the impatient fail to notice our protagonist's escape. Once a safe distance is established, a compelling abelt continues. Dialogue ensues between the fathers and children. Having perused various reviews and critiques, many have condemned the scene, arguing that a military man, having risked his life, could not possibly resist his convictions and fraternize with his enemy, whose intention was to kill Jake Sully. However, in this instance, I must respectfully disagree. I appreciated the nascent development of so-called grey morality and the planting of the notion in the colonel's mind that matters are not always so black and white. The world the protagonist inhabits possesses a depth exceeding their perception, suggesting a significant underlying reason for the connection between Ava and Spider-Man and the colonel's ability to inhabit a Navy body. I appreciated this dialogue. Albeit the character's somewhat cringeworthy self-deprecating irony detracted from the overall atmosphere, although the idea itself is intriguing.
Suddenly, Neytiri arrives on the scene, discovering her family in the process.
After all, our tower has now transcended the ground in science fiction that defined it in the initial installment. You know, the one featuring cryo-sleep for interstellar travel and space stations reminiscent of contemporary designs. Avatar has metamorphosed into an unequivocally fantastical narrative. While perhaps not a crippling flaw, it arguably detracts from the overall immersion within the universe. Wouldn't you concur? I'm still reeling from the revelation of Wild Blubber's purported ability to halt human aging. And now, we're presented with a Spider-Man Avatar hybrid. As expected, Cameron predictably replicates his established formula film after film. To paraphrase the revered classics, consistency is either a hallmark of mastery or a reluctance to innovate. Once again, the offspring branching out from their elders stumble into dire straits, finding themselves captured by the airstrike. Though the parents promptly arrive on the scene, their surprise result proves ineffectual, resulting in the paternal figures also getting the short end of the sick from the Farley Brook banks. The ash-striped chieftain has an interest in firearms, And of course the Colonel is no slouch. Spotting an attractive woman, he immediately moved in, explaining the ins and outs of loading, aiming and firing. The hearse response is fairly reasonable, essentially a thank you, but I have no further use for you. One would anticipate the heroes being eliminated at this point. However, inexplicably they are merely tied up, left on the ground while their captors embark on their nefarious activities. Impaired by the substances they've ingested, the impatient fail to notice our protagonist's escape. Once a safe distance is established, a compelling abelt continues. Dialogue ensues between the fathers and children. Having perused various reviews and critiques, many have condemned the scene, arguing that a military man, having risked his life, could not possibly resist his convictions and fraternize with his enemy, whose intention was to kill Jake Sully. However, in this instance, I must respectfully disagree. I appreciated the nascent development of so-called grey morality and the planting of the notion in the Colonel's mind that matters are not always so black and white. The world the protagonist inhabits possesses a depth exceeding their perception, suggesting a significant underlying reason for the connection between Ava and Spider-Man and the Colonel's ability to inhabit a Navy body. I appreciated this dialogue, albeit the character's somewhat cringeworthy self-deprecating irony detracted from the overall atmosphere, although the idea itself is intriguing.
Oh my god! Wow!
So, Immaculate Conception plays out in real life. Avatar doesn't just offer historical, philosophical and socially significant allusions. It delves into biblical and religion themes as well. Essentially, Great Mother Eva decreed that Kiri should immolate Jesus, acting as a conduit between the Navy and humanity. Therefore, as Grace lay dying, her soul nearly made a complete transference into her avatar, and Eva impregnate Grace's avatar effectively. Scientists made the discovery when they nearly entered the avatar Grace, leading them to cultivate the fetus of Kiri within the disease avatar. Moreover, I appreciated the metamorphosis in Neytiri's character, who subsequent to her son's demise evolved into a formidable, embittered and resilient woman, even to the point where she would wish Spider's death. This was a stark alteration, yet I must concede that I welcomed such developments. Conversely, Jake Sully's stance was a point of dissatisfaction for me. I'm about to crank my penchant for finding profound meaning up to 11, but I'm beginning to suspect Jake Sully is a deep-cover operative consistently executing his marine directive. Otherwise, I struggle to rationalize the fact that, anywhere he sets foot, the Navy population and Pandora's fauna invariably diminish exponentially. Thus, the resurgence of large-scale tulkun hunting has prompted the sentient creatures to convene a tribunal, culminating in Payakan's banishment. This particular whale shares a profound spiritual kinship with Loak, the protagonist's son. Loak is disgruntled and justifiably so, given that Payakan was instrumental in saving all the protagonists in the previous installment. The crux of the matter is that he's inciting the male tulkuns to engage in combat, resulting in significant fatalities. The tulkuns are striving to preserve their species, thus they prefer to maintain a low profile and have chosen to banish the instigator. Unsurprisingly, Loak takes exception to this and begins to grumble. Indeed, there seems to be a dearth of scenes where Jake's son isn't complaining, frequently jeopardizing their family's residency in foreign territory. Jake in turn lashes out at his son, openly accusing him of his elder brother's death. Immense gratitude is due to the father, as his words and accusation drive Loak to the brink of suicide, with only a hair's breadth separating him from death. In his exchanges with his wife, Jake persistently exacerbates Neytiri's profound grief. He incessantly reminds her of their son's demise and their perceived marginalization as non-native human interlopers, or sky people. Neytiri already struggles immensely with this reality, particularly as the chieftain's daughter who shouldered the responsibility for her people, only to ultimately abandon them at Jake's behest. She is finding it incredibly difficult, having to endure and acquiesce to the prevailing norms on this new community. And to compound matters, her husband, instead of offering support during his acutely challenging period, is pressuring her line blame, returning with statements like, "Well, you chose me, knowing full well what I am, so you'll just have to put up with it."
Oh, how convenient.
The only thing in dearest luck to Neytiri is his decision to repair her father's vow.
Subsequently, the film redundantly replicates sequences from its predecessor. Recall those breathtaking scenes when we are initially introduced to motion capture technology utilized underwater. Indeed, there were ones where our protagonists as a family learned to swim and navigate the subaquatic world. Well, precisely the same concept is now protected to a considerably extended duration, seemingly just for Spider-Man's benefit. However, I must concede that the visuals are utterly mesmerizing. This exemplifies cinematic graphics at their finest. Even without the 3D experience, one feels completely immersed, as if on the verge of being splashed by the sea spray. Children with exceptional needs present challenges of correspondingly exceptional magnitude. Human kid now faces the imperative of learning to breathe anew to truly master this planet, as well as cultivating a USB tensor to connect with Ava. With the pressing need to locate his son, the Colonel resorts to his established methods, initiating a fresh series of raids in an attempt to find the unique breathing boy. As the protracted search drags on, he decided to expedite the process by enlisting the assistance of the local populace, a group characterized by the internecine conflicts, alternatively known as the Ash People. On a planet as immense as Pandora, how did he manage to track down and locate the Ash People so swiftly? Pandora isn't some backwater village. It is a very large satellite. Jake, by his own admission in the previous installment, spent weeks traversing the expanse to relocate his family to the Water Tribe. So, on such a vast world, how did the Colonel pinpoint the Ash People settlements? Let's concede he discovered their whereabouts through some telltale smoke. But how did he ascertain the precise location of that particular woman? But why I am even posing such facile questions? Of course, everything is accomplished with a mere snap of the fingers, thanks to a tech who is motivated by a six-pack. Following a brief drug-induced haze, the protagonist broke an alliance. The Fire Clan will receive firearms, and the Colonel will be furnished with assistance in locating the boy. During this arrival, Varan, the chieftain of the Fire Tribe is called, recounts her history. As it transpires, Varang's entire settlement was consumed by flames when she was just a child. The inhabitants did everything within their power to cure the blaze, and fervently supplicated Ava for assistance, but ultimately she was the sole survivor. What a profoundly intriguing theme I'm used at the moment in the cinema.
You'll concede, I trust, that a touch of moral ambiguity would breathe new life into the narrative.
Of course!
We've been presented with a compelling promise. A tribe on Pandora requires protection specifically from Ava. While fire is undeniably a volatile element, one would assume the Great Mother could readily manage it. The tribe sought succor from Ava, yet their pleas went unanswered. Indeed, considering all past encounters with Ava, who discerned a pattern, she only extended aid and support to the protagonists when her own existence was imperiled. In essence, she only deigned to bestow her power when confronted with a palpable threat to her survival. For instance, humanity's extraction of vital resources for survival, such as tanoptanium, or indeed the colonization by humankind devastating Ava. It must be considered that this constitutes a multifaceted, controversial and intriguing premise, which would inevitably expound on the Avatar narrative. The conflict would be amplified, demonstrating that matters are rarely clear-cut. The antagonist could potentially revise their stance, and Ava may not invariably reserve as a benevolent benefactor and Mother Nature. However, the director neglected to explore this avenue. The narrative thread concerning the Fire and Ash tribe was not merely left unresolved. It suffered complete neglect and ultimate abandonment.
That's it! Yes! That's all the fire in the movie called Avatar, Fire and Ash.
The deal is sealed. My understanding is that the protagonists began to draw sustenance from one another's passion, and the exchange ultimately culminates in assimilation.
Oh my!
Here Cameron subtly intimates that the Colonel is mirroring Jake's transformation from their first installment. what with the newfound romantic interests and the occupation on the avatar body. However, Jake's decision to embrace life as an avatar in the original film transcended mere physical advantages or a blue-skinned companion. Jake underwent a profound journey of self-discovery, ultimately connecting with his true essence, encompassing his soul and core values. Neytiri's choice to be with Jake transcended mere physical attraction. She recognized his transformative growth and his burgeoning awareness of a reality that extended far beyond the confines of the material world. This understanding was precisely what Neytiri sought to impart as she prepared him to integration into her clan. This context imbues the navy phrase "I see you" with a depth of meaning far surpassing a simple declaration of love within their culture. Yet, Cameron, seemingly oblivious to the profound depth established in the original, delivers a superficial and vapid comparison lasting merely a couple of minutes, a stark contrast to the initial film's nuance. 15 years on, romantic content tropes are subtly interwoven throughout. Loak actively pursues the aquatic princess, while Spider-Man receives his first kiss from Jesus Carey. As for the nascent location of villains, the efforts are being fruit. Jake's location has been swiftly ascertained. He is with the Vartan tribe. It's rather perplexing that the military hasn't immediately descended upon them, considering their prior engagement transpired there in the last installment. Just as 2 and 2 invariably equals 4 in the realm of mathematics, it's an axiom among Cameron screenwriters that unattended children inevitably find themselves in dire straits. Spider-Man is ensnared by the Ash people, while Killer miraculously managed to evade capture. The Sully family's sanctuary has been compromised. It would appear that an all-out military conflagration is nigh, for the Water tribe is ostensibly defenseless. This is essentially what's left over from the previous engagement, and they are armed with spears and bows. It's somewhat peculiar that Ava has chosen this moment to eschew firearms. So, we are presented with a stark juxtaposition of good and evil. It's the Flame Clan with their weaponry versus our protagonists, imbued with spirit of Ava. Cognizant of the broader implications, Jake solely capitulated, a concession that spared everyone else from the villain's wrath. I'm about to dab this. Brace yourself, folks, you'll be clutching your sides with laughter. Colonel Quaritch arrives and announces at the military base with a prisoner and his new attractive girlfriend. In blatant defiance of her explicit orders, he practically spits in her face of the general, who had clearly stipulated that no unauthorized personnel were to be admitted. Quaritch then proceeds to house the Ash People tribe within the base itself, and while the media and reporters document the entire debacle, I am at a loss as to what is more preposterous in this situation. Is it the Corner's flagrant disregard for security protocols, the insubordination displayed by ignoring direct orders, or the sheer audacity of having media outlets and reporters traipsing around a military base on an inland planet? Our heroes are facing a dire predicament. Spider-Man, uniquely adapted to breathe on this planet, is immediately slated for resection. Jake Sully is now held captive awaiting execution. Compounding matters, Jake's son Loak has once again found himself in harm's way. Rushing headlong after a rock well and narrowly escaping death, were it not for the intervention of the Water tribe's chief's children. Spider-Man is being pressed for information regarding the origin of his powers, unbeknownst to his interrogators that they stem from a spider bite during a college fleet trip. Consequently, Cameron is compelled to contrive a duplicate of the initial incident. Meanwhile, the Colonel fully embraces a paternal role, attempting to manipulate the gullible youth by claiming to be his real father, professing profound love for his deceased mother, acknowledging her admirable qualities and the difficulties of living with her, and ultimately her demise. How is this even feasible? Any military personnel out there, can enlighten me as to whether it's permissible to reside on restricted military installations with spouses? I'm referring to a high-security base, not a conventional military town, where extended family members are commonly housed. How could the situation have possibly transpired? In this seemingly inescapable predicament for all the protagonists, Neytiri acts as a deus ex machina, having endured several trials. Serious wounds and injuries, she summons the strength to fly solo, mercifully without her children to rescue her husband. Procuring arrows, including explosive ones, she obtains access to the base, repaints herself in the colors of the Fire Clan, until infiltrates the enemy's lair. Neytiri locates the Fire Tribe's chieftain and ascertains the whereabouts of Jake Sully's imprisonment. Embarking on her journey to reach Jake, she simultaneously inflicts substantial damage upon the human base.
Singularly, nature achieves more devastation than the combined efforts of the entire tribe and Jake. That epitomizes the essence of a clan princess. Evidently, a party imitation of Grace, a local insurgent if you will, has infiltrated the human ranks. Recall the doctor from the preceding installment, the one who professed admiration for the tall con whilst simultaneously playing an active role in the raid targeting those very creatures? Well, that doctor infiltrates a colossal vehicle and extracts Jakes from confinement. Meanwhile, Spider-Man proves equally resourceful, deftly picking the lock on his cell and making his escape. Should the astute viewer question the presence of a traditional lock on a cell with automatic doors in a far-flung future, the author would retort that its existence is as plausible as the conspicuous absence of any significant military presence on what is ostensibly a military base. After all, the protagonists encounter each other and abscond with remarkable ease, facing no pursuit, no homing missiles. Absolutely nothing! For this, to put it mildly, egregious dereliction of duty, the colonel is relieved of his post. He is then confronted with the very words he once used against Jake, accused of trading integrity for expediency and failing to fulfill his obligations. What an enforcing twist! A veritable U-turn worthy of Dominic Toretto himself. Another scene sent shivers down my spine, while simultaneously filling me with exhilaration. It was truly captivating, possessing an air of profound stateliness. Jake's realization that people will invariably crave not only Spider-Man's demise, but also a comprehensive understanding of his unique capabilities is particularly striking. Inevitably, humanity will discover a means of replicating his extraordinary ability to breathe. Having already secured the Fire Clan of Nereus as allies, it's highly probable they will devise methods to extract information regarding Ava's intricacies. Consequently, Jake resolved that the child must be eliminated. Firstly, to spare the child a life of potential torment, likely involving dissection in the pursuit of answers. Secondly, to safeguard the indigenous population from the impending human menace. Predictably, Jake proved incapable of such an act. And Neytiri, who abhorred a subconscious desire for Spider to atone for such contemplations, was relieved. Here, the legendary I see you. The scene is no joke, it gives you goosebumps. Oh friends, extraordinarily dramatic and profound scenes are beginning to unfold in the wake of this pivotal juncture. It appears our protagonist Jake Sully has achieved equilibrium between safeguarding his family and defending the Neri clans. He has reaffirmed that being Turuk Maktor is not a mantle one can casually assume. It is a lifelong commitment. And so our hero commences united the clans in order to confront the relentless and formidably armed Sky people. Even the Tolkien Whales, previously averse to combat, are joining this war effort. The climactic showdown is derivative in the extreme. A social and carbon copy on the final battle from the first installment ran tormented through the lens of the second. Our protagonists initially gained the upper hand through collaborative efforts, only for their progress to be undermined by the colonel's arrival with his associate, intent on resolving on outstanding issues with Jake. Yes, this is yet another allegory alluding to the colonel's transformation into someone akin to Jake in his early days. Such a formidable adversary and unprecedented for Jake. And as we are all aware, confronting oneself, my friends, proved to be the ultimate challenge. Precisely when the enemy's forces swelled, our arm began to suffer significant setbacks, enduring considerable losses. It was at the critical juncture that Kiri resolved to implore Ava for aid, even at the cost of her own existence. Through this sacrifice, she connected with Miles, and together they managed to beseech assistance. However, the support proved somewhat limited. While nurtured its star, it failed to inflict damage on the scale witnessed in the initial conflict. Regrettably, the wife of the Water Tribe's chieftain succumbed to injuries sustained during childbirth. Consequently, Neytiri, who was attending the birth, along with the newborn that her daughter took, were taken captive. Simultaneously, Jake sustained a wound, compelling him and her son to embark on a mission to liberate their family. Yes! Again! I want to ask Cameron to stop now! Enough with the kids! Fortunately, Ava's electromagnetic vortex lends our heroes a hand, through it begins to pull their equipment into its whirling depth. They manage to escape unscathed, initiating the ultimate showdown between the Colonel and Jake. However, a twist of fate sees Spider-Man ensnared by the vortex, prompting the Colonel to dive in for their rescue, with Jake hot on their heels.
A bizarre scene unfolds as everyone is hauled back from the precipice, giving way to that familiar, amicable exchange between men after a struggle. However, this is abruptly cut short by the colonel's sudden desire to extricate himself from this awkward situation, leading him to leap from the cliff's edge. Whether he's to right this act remains to be seen, presumably to be revealed in the subsequent installment. Ultimately, the final scene depicts Miles Spider-Man being assimilated into Ava alongside all the other heroes, Mira and Jake solely accepted into the Navy clan. The spirits residing within Ava welcomed him, created a genuinely spine-tingling moment. However, it was only during the script writing process that I began to have some reservations. Hang on a moment, folks, what's the connection to Flames and Ashes here? And why does the narrative conclude with Spider-Man instead of Jake, who was supposed to undergo his own personal journey? We're seemingly being prompted to identify as representative of humanity with this fledgling human. I beg to differ. The audience identified with the protagonist with whom they were being engaged from the outset. And why such a dearth of representation for the fine nation? They are also a conspicuous absence of fauna adapted to volcanic environments, which would have been a fascinating spectacle. Furthermore, are brought under the misapprehension that airborne Ikran were the exclusive preserve of the air Normans. Tulkun, acting as the spiritual kindred, mirror the role of whales to the water tribe. I had anticipated at the very least some fire-breathing creatures. Recall the plethora of wildlife showcased in the initial installment. Alas, all we were privy to was a flamethrower.
I still feel incomplete after watching this movie.
Cameron reaffirms his position as a master of visual storytelling. The introduction of the Ash people, who appear to be morally ambiguous, adds complexity to the original narrative, although they are rather conveniently forgotten by the end. Consider this: only Neytiri's arc is generally well developed, as she navigates the stage of denial, anger, bargaining, and acceptance in relation to the humans. Jake's soulless conflict with Colonel Quaritch remains unresolved, given the latter demise by his own hand. The Sully's personal dramas and their interactions with their children still resonate, yet feel stagnant. The narrative lacks a definitive climax, presenting instead fragmented vignettes, due to the convoluted and disjointed storylines.
Throughout the film, I keep wondering, where is the novelty in the storytelling?
The narrative arcs frequently feel derivative or pure installments. But copying from oneself is not copying, but borrowing ideas. So what's not to find fault with? A commentator remarked on one of my videos that it contained excessive padding. Similarly, it appears Cameron perhaps so enamored with his own creation that he neglects the necessity of a brief's narrative pace. Following an initial hour of visual splendor, the plot begins to noticeably falter. Cameron possesses undeniable visual brilliance, however his forte doesn't invariably extend to dialogue. Listening to the soldiers be laden banter and the teenagers reveal swordbirds, one perceives a certain hollowness and reliance on cliché or bombast within the dialogues, while the film boasts a plethora of characters, profoundness remains conspicuously absent. Fire and Ash is undoubtedly a spectacle that demands to be seen on the largest screen possible to truly appreciate its visual dynamism. It broadened the scope of Pandora, showcasing previously unseen and captivating locales. Nevertheless, it fails to surmount a fundamental issue: the reiteration of a familiar narrative. The film excels at demonstrating what we're seeing, but falters in articulating why it should resonate with us. James Cameron unequivocally remains an unparalleled visionary and technological virtuoso, possessing the rare ability to conjure immersive words that ignite our imaginations. However, his directorial ethos, prioritizing technological advancements our narrative substance, ultimately undermines his efforts. His preoccupation with world building often eclipses with necessity of crafting a compelling and original storyline.
What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments. Thanks to the boosters and the subscribers. See you later!